Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Washington County Sheriff Pat Garrett. Tonight, I'm here with Undersheriff John Cook, and on behalf of everyone at the Washington County Sheriff's Office, we welcome you to tonight's community workshop and conversation about our independent review of our use of force policies, procedures, training, and related internal matters. Before we get underway, rather, our first order of business is to do introductions, and I'll ask John Cook to go down our list and handle that for us. John.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good evening, everybody. My name is John Cook. I'm the Undersheriff here at the Sheriff's Office. As I go through the list and read off your names, if you could just state a little bit about yourself and what organization you're representing tonight. And I'll start off with Rob Drake.
Thank you, Under Sheriff Cook and Sheriff Garrett. I am Rob Drake. I serve as city manager in Cornelius and have for 10 years. And we contract with Sheriff's Office. We have the last 8 years. And we're extremely happy with the service we receive from the sheriff. And I have read the report and look forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maria Caballero Rubio. Maria. We'll go on to Luis Hernandez. Sorry, Luis, your sound isn't very good. We can come back to you and try again in a little bit. Russ Sheldon.
Thank you. Russ Sheldon with the North Plains City Council and currently serving as its council president. And we are also contracting with the Sheriff's Office with our services, and we're very pleased with the product we received.
Thank you. Olga Okuna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olga, and I am an educator by profession. I am here as co-chair of the Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Olga. Ricardo Moreno.
Good evening, everyone. I'm also, so I'm a community member, and I'm also with the Latino, sorry, I changed the languages, Latino Advisory Commission, and also with the ESPD, the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Laird.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Laird. I am a member of the ESPD Advisory Committee as well, the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol Division. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Jessica Miyake.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I am the current chair of the ESPD Citizen Advisory Committee.
Thank you. Emily Windsor Fox.
Emily Fox. I'm a staff attorney with Disability Rights Oregon with their Mental Health Rights Project.
Thank you. Justin Lockey.
Sheriff and Undersheriff and distinguished members, I am a proud longtime Hillsborough resident, a proud father of a 21-year-old OSU student, and I'm in my 7th term as chair of the Washington County Civil Service Commission, and we're very proud of our sheriff and the organization. Thank you.
Jim Dreary.
My name is Jim Deary, and I am the coordinator of the Oak Hills Neighborhood Watch Program. That's a 650 home community just north of Cornell Street. We have been in partnership with the Sheriff's Office for the better part of 25 or 30 years. And we're very proud of that relationship and very happy with the performance of the sheriff's office and their willingness to partner with us.
Thank you. Bob Hall.
Yes, thank you, first of all, for the invitation. I'm a resident of the Claremont community, adjacent to Jim's community, and we have started an emergency preparedness program about 3 years ago. And as a part of that, we started to include also kind of a security overwatch. And so thank you for the invitation. I'm also a retired FBI agent who taught at the FBI Academy, and having read the Polis document, I find it both worthwhile and appropriate, but I also think that the Sheriff's Department is doing a fantastic job. Having interacted with police agencies from around the country, I sincerely mean that I think you're doing a fantastic job, and so I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Grace Sanchez.
I'm a community organizer. I'm a former Marine, my husband and I, and we've been working with our neighborhood through Neighborhood Watch and community building. And I'm also a former training and development manager, and have worked in recruitment, training, behavioral sciences, and so forth. So I find this study very interesting and engaging, and I'm appreciating what you're doing at your office. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll come back to Maria Caballero. It looks like you're unmuted now.
Yes, thank you. Maria Caballero Rubio. I'm the executive director at Centro Cultural, one of the longest and oldest nonprofits in the state of Oregon, celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. I'm also on the Governor's Racial Justice Council, on the Criminal Justice Reform and Police Accountability Committee, and also a proud member of the Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Maria. Casey Lewis.
Hello there, my name is Casey Lewis. I'm the managing attorney for the Mental Health Rights Project with Disability Rights Oregon. Very much appreciate being here.
Thank you. Just want to make sure we did not forget any other community members. Is there anybody that has not yet introduced himself?
Yeah, I wanted to give it a second chance, second try here. Yeah,
got you now.
City councilor in the city of Cornelius, my day job is as an emergency manager, and so looking at after action reports, continuous improvement, things like that are interesting, and so I really appreciated the report. That it was really well done, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
Under Sheriff. This is Rob Drake. There's also a member here, Anna Sanchez, who is a member of our Youth Advisory Council and representing youth today. She's muted, but her camera is on.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Hello,
Anna.
I'm Anna Sanchez, and I am part of the Youth Advisory Cornelius Council.
Thank you, Anna. Sheriff, I think that's everyone. We'll turn it back to you.
Did I see Seth White just join? Seth, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Yeah, Seth. So we're just kind of identifying ourselves, and if you're representing a group or an organization, that would be great to know as well.
Did you say that for me? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Seth White. I apologize. I was trying to take this call from home, and I've been stuck in traffic trying to get home for the last 45 minutes. You guys don't need to know that. Seth White. I'm one of the chief attorneys. I run the major felony unit at the Metropolitan Public Defender's Office in Washington County. And I don't know that I'm representing a group other than just somebody who's involved in the community process out there for criminal justice. So
beautiful. This is Sheriff Garrett again. I am no kidding, humbled by the turnout tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We will get underway. I have a few comments to open, and then I'm gonna hand the baton over to Jonathan Winder and Ms. Rodriguez for them to introduce themselves. They're gonna host our conversation tonight from Polis Solutions. I just want to go back to November 2020. Following a competitive process, we at the Sheriff's Office hired Polis Solutions to conduct this thorough use of force review. We committed to this project to accomplish several important goals as a learning organization. And I'll just cover the three main ones. One, ensure that we are strongly aligned with best practice. Best practices, there's a spectrum, right? And so we might be on that spectrum, but that's not good enough for us. We want to be as strongly aligned with best practice when it comes to use of force as we can possibly be. Number two, to facilitate a deeper engagement and conversation with our internal and external stakeholders. This project starts and ends with you, our community. And so that was a really important part, a goal of why we committed to this project. And then number three, to simply foster community trust and safety. You know, at the end of the day, that's really where we have to measure up and do the right thing. If we're not building trust and improving safety, then we're not getting it done. So those were the three goals, primary goals. The result is a 74-page report. Thank you for reading that in preparation for tonight. It has actionable recommendations, as you well know. The investment in this project and the data analysis and hard work that went into the report is just the first tangible step, right? There's a lot of work ahead of us. The report is the first step towards results. And the conversation today is moving that project forward, building rapport, kind of taking that first step to build trust from this project. And you're an important part. The project begins and ends with you. Partnering to give fair weight to your voice is what we really hope to accomplish tonight. And to take advantage of the collective wisdom in this virtual room. For those viewing today's meeting and not in the actual virtual room, you can find the report on our website, the Washington County Sheriff's Office. If you type accountability into the search field, it'll take you to a page, our accountability page. You go about halfway down, you'll see the Polis project there, and the report is linked in that paragraph. I also want to be clear that we at the Sheriff's Office embrace the idea at the forefront of the Polis report that all use of force be grounded in a culture of necessity rather than permissibility. As the Polis team found in the research, there is some data that encourages us. Deputies' use of force rate is a fraction of the estimated national rate. Our deputies use force at about 0.4% of all community contacts. The national average is believed to be about 2%. So that's encouraging. However, we while we're already below the national average, we also are committed to ensuring that use of force is used only when necessary. And if there are outliers, which there are, I mean, I will just admit to you up front, all you have to do is follow the news to know there are outliers within our agency. So this project is designed in part to eliminate those outliers, and so that we focus on the necessity as a strong part of our culture when it comes to use of force. I also understand that use of force is a topic that is morally, legally, and tactically fraught. It's the most consequential thing that any law enforcement agency or officer does is use force. Making the hard work by the Polis team, the data that goes into the report and the recommendations, super important for us to make good on, to follow up as part of strengthening trust and building trust in our community. We extended 29 invitations to tonight's conversation, and we had 17 respond they can join us tonight. So thank you again for being here. We had more than one invitee respond, thank you. I'll just share an example. So I chatted with the chair of the Council on American Islamic Relations, Mr. Zakir Khan, and told him about tonight's meeting. He was super interested, but has a bandwidth issues and conflicts for tonight. He said, look, send your report, Sheriff. We will read it and we will get our impressions and thoughts back to you. So that's also super helpful to us. And I thank him for his willingness to provide us feedback in that way. It works for them. Since we received the report, we've taken 2 steps that I want to share with you. So we briefed this report to our Washington County Board of Commission, our chair and commissioners. We answered their questions. We got them up to speed on the project status as the report was concluded. That was in late December. And then we've already had internal discussions among our own staff and leaders about these recommendations. And, I'll just share with you, we've got momentum here to move these recommendations forward. There's 72 or 74, that. It's reasonable that we're not going to implement every single one, right? But we have a lot that makes sense for us to move forward on, and having you here tonight to help inform us about those recommendations that make the most sense to you is incredibly important for us when it comes to prioritizing and moving forward with these recommendations. So thank you so much for your patience for just letting me make those comments. Dr. Winder and Ms. Rodriguez are here from the Polis Solutions to moderate tonight's discussion. I'm excited to have them join us and weigh in. So Jonathan and Denise, would you please continue for us?
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Under Sheriff. And thank you, especially community members, for taking the time to participate in this important dialogue, which we're confident will be the first of many conversations you have among yourselves about how best to deal with this momentous issue of the use of force. I'm just going to give you a very brief background on myself, yield the floor to Denise. And before we go any further, after Denise introduces herself, I'm going to briefly introduce in absentia the members of our team who are not here. I'm a hybrid cop social scientist. I served for 20 years in the Seattle area, and I'm a social scientist whose area of passion and expertise is face-to-face human interactions in situations where risk is high and trust is low. My passion at Polis, the work that we do, centers on trying to improve the way that law enforcement agencies and communities handle the complexities of face-to-face interactions at both individual and large scales. I'm going to turn the floor over to Denise for her introduction, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the rest of the folks on our team. Denise.
Thanks, Jonathan. So again, my name is Denise Rodriguez. A bit of my background. So in addition to working alongside Jonathan on a couple of projects like this one, I'm currently the Chief Deputy Monitor on the Puerto Rico Consent Decree. My background is in research, and over the last 13 years or so, I've worked with a number of police agencies across the country on issues related to reform, such as use of force, internal investigations, training, civilian oversight, accountability, and community engagement. And look forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Introductions in absentia in alphabetical order, Dr. Mark Brown. Mark is one of our senior advisors on constitutional policing, racial equity, and use of force. Mark serves on the faculty of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia, and has his PhD in educational leadership. Sergeant Don Gula retired after 34 years of service with the King County, Washington Sheriff's Office. Don is nationally known for his innovative work on integrating verbal and physical skills to support effective de-escalation. Don also has many years of expertise managing police programs related to co-response and effective management of mental health crises and people struggling with emotional crises. Ms. Margaret Horner is one of our program managers. She handled the day-to-day operations of this effort. Margaret has a background in criminal justice and community policing. Tom Laird. Tom is a retired FBI senior executive. Tom served for many years in the FBI Inspector General's office and was also the FBI's ranking representative in Iraq after Operation Iraqi Freedom, where he was tasked with supporting the resurrection of policing and intelligence operations in Iraq in a manner that aligns with democratic polities and international human rights. Track Silipadurian. Track is a 20-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department, where he serves as the department's lead expert witness in all city litigation related to use of force, Track is also responsible for all de-escalation programs inside the Chicago Police Department. I've really been honored to work with our team, and I want to say right out of the gate that no report like this is perfect. So to the extent that there are errors, problems, flaws in the report, those are my responsibility and mine alone. And I'm really delighted that we've been able to work with the Sheriff's Office and with our own team here. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about the report. You've all had the opportunity to read it. So I'm just going to give a few very brief high-level remarks. And then what Denise and I are going to do is just go down the roster. And I'm just going to go through the roster as it appears on my screen. And in just a couple of minutes here, I'm going to ask you all for some of the input that we'd like to get. As the sheriff already said, use of force is the most morally and practically consequential thing that police departments do. Policing by its nature is ambiguous. I always tell people that I think police cars should be gray instead of black and white, because policing takes place in moments of ambiguity and crisis. And much as we all wish it were otherwise, there will always be times and places when law enforcement officers have to use force, tragically up to and including deadly force. A lot of what we do at Polis is try to bring to bear research and best practices in other fields where professionals are entrusted with human lives in very difficult circumstances. These are fields like emergency medicine and aviation, where people have to make split-second decisions where life and limb are at stake. And we have challenged the Sheriff's Office to move forward in its operations and think about use of force in the way that medical professionals think about the necessity of sometimes having to inflict pain on the human body for the greater good of health. Everybody on this call has endured across the course of your life all kinds of uncomfortable medical procedures. And if you think for a moment about the ritual of going to the doctor's office and having your blood drawn or having your teeth cleaned, what would the myriad things that all of us go through, the reason we, all other things being equal, cooperate with medical professionals is that we trust them. And so I'm going to share with you what I said to the sheriff when we first began the selection process for this project a couple of years ago. I said, Sheriff, if you choose Polis, I'm going to tell you right now what we're going to recommend in our report. And what I said to him then is what I'm saying to all of you now. At the end of the day, all the technical recommendations aside, all the policy recommendations aside, all the details aside, this report comes down to one thing, and that thing is this. The Sheriff's Office has to work in a deliberate, disciplined, focused manner to maximize the positive outcome of every single human interaction inside the Sheriff's Office and between the Sheriff's Office and the community. So I recognize as well, my obligation here tonight, Denise's obligation, meeting you as total strangers, is to try to sow a little bit more trust between ourselves and you, and between you and the Sheriff's Office, so that we can set conditions for a fruitful dialogue around a very, very difficult topic. If the matters in this report were easy and straightforward and simple, I would be unemployed. These are intractably difficult dilemmas. And I don't think I don't need to tell anybody on this call that the relationship between law enforcement agencies and communities is as tense and fraught as it has been for, I would say, a half a century. That being said, I want to introduce a note of optimism and encouragement into this conversation. And I want to do it by saying the following. One of the things Denise and I and our colleagues do as we go around the country and work with different agencies is try to get a workable sense of what the level of trust is like internally within the organization and between the organization and the community. And I have to say, with no flattery intended, with no hyperbole intended, one of the first things we noticed when we started doing interviews within the Sheriff's Office and in the community is that the level of trust within the Sheriff's Office and the level of trust between the community and the Sheriff's Office is exceptionally high. Denise came to me early in this project and said, Jonathan, here we go. We're going to write one of these reports and people are going to roll their eyes. They're not going to want to do the stuff that we talk about. And we have been really impressed by the reception we've gotten from the Sheriff's Office at all levels, from the sheriff down to rank and file folks, people who are willing to listen and embrace change. And we've most of all been impressed by people at all ranks in the organization who've said, you know what, I really love working in Washington County. I like the community. I'm proud to be here. The community supports us. And likewise, when we've spoken to folks in the community, people have not been shy about expressing their concerns and criticisms, but those concerns and criticisms have been tempered by a deeply rooted sense of trust. All of this is to say that no police department is perfect. No sheriff's office is perfect. No community is without its problems and challenges. However, I would be hard pressed to think of another agency, another community as well positioned as Washington County and its sheriff's office to move forward and really advance the state of the art in how the use of force is handled across all elements of the organization. So with those brief remarks in mind, I want to yield to Denise to add anything that she would like. And then we're just going to start working through the roster and having a conversation. Denise, I yield back to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. No, I just want to reiterate your point about how refreshing it has been to work with an agency that has been so open and to having honest and tough conversations, especially around what needs to change and what needs to improve. So, the willingness to look internally, even when it's a little bit painful, goes a long way in terms of actually changing the culture of the department. So again, completely impressed with the working relationship we've had with the sheriff's office. Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. It's projects like this are a bit odd because we're hired by police agencies and the municipalities they serve to come in and take an honest look and say things that are critical and uncomfortable. Nobody likes to be criticized. Nobody likes to be called into question. That's a natural human tendency. So the first thing we do when we start these projects is work hard and deliberately to earn the trust of our client, in this case, the people of Washington County and the sheriff's office. And we have been really impressed time and time again at the communications we've had within the sheriff's office. And something else I want to highlight that I forgot to mention, very often when we go to police departments and sheriff's offices, there is a lot of backstabbing, criticism, nasty comments, especially because the interviews we do are confidential and anonymous. And Sheriff Garrett, I want to thank you again for letting us follow that protocol here. All the interviews we did are anonymous, confidential. Those include the community interviews. So people knew that they could say what they wanted to say. Even that being said, we were continuously and without exception impressed by the fact that even when people were critical of each other within the sheriff's office, they were always respectful. And we think that's really setting conditions for positive dialogue. What I'd like to do now, and we've got about 90 minutes here, and I know that that amount of time is really not commensurate with the task at hand, but here's what I'd like to do. And by design, it's mirroring what we did with our internal workshop at the sheriff's office. The sheriff mentioned that we did an internal workshop, and it worked like this. We assembled a group of stakeholders about the same size as the group of all of you gathered this afternoon. And we went around the table and we asked each person to tell us, number one, what in the report resonated most with you? Of all the things you read, what struck you as most important? Of all the recommendations here, and there are dozens, what do you really think the sheriff's office should do? And again, we recognize when we make these recommendations that some of them are easy and free. Some of them are very complicated and take a lot of time and a lot of money. So we recognize there are all kinds of practical, operational, ethical, financial, and other choices to be made. So we want to hear from each of you, all things being equal, where do you think the sheriff's office should focus its time, resources, and money first and foremost? We also want to hear from each of you what you didn't like about the report. What did we miss? What did we get wrong? What's inaccurate? What could we have done better? And are there recommendations you want to add to the mix that we left out? Again, we're all fallible. I think I really hats off to Denise and the rest of our team for the amazing job they did with this report, but there are errors in here and they're my fault. So call me out, tell me what we got wrong. And also, as we go around the table, tell us what we got right, what you think we should do most, what do you not like, and please ask any questions, any additional thoughts or comments. To facilitate the dialogue, I want to go around the table at least once, and then Denise and I will try to identify some of the key themes that have come up and respond, but I really want to go around sequentially so we be sure that every voice has an opportunity to weigh in. If there are any questions, confusions, technical glitches throughout, please feel free to raise your hand or send a comment to Denise and me. Well, without further ado, I'm just going to go down the roster, which I'm looking at on my screen. And I'm going to begin with 487611, whoever's logged in is 487611. I have one number and lots of names, and I apologize if there's not a name here.
That's not my cell number, but I'm ready.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I enjoyed the report. Thought it was quite comprehensive. I admired the emphasis upon seeking best practices rather than more of a broad approach to what's acceptable. I thought that having had a small police department myself in my far distant past, that there were a lot of things that had to occur simultaneously in order for that to occur. And I know that that's a very arduous process to get the standard operating procedures up and running, and to get individuals online, to get the cadre in place with the right message, and finally to get the troops all on the same sheet of music. So I thought it was a very daunting task. Having dealt with the Washington County Sheriff's Office for a number of years, I know that they've got a huge head start because of all of the things they've done right. I think the changing of individual policies to reflect reality, and the fact that some of those were, in your estimation, not consistent, I thought was an important step forward. And that, to me, is one of the biggest processes or step in the process that's important to keep track of. In other words, keeping the focus on what's important. And I was very much impressed with the report overall, and thought that the Sheriff's Department, I'd be interested to hear what they feel are the most important things to go forward with first, and what sort of a timeline it's going to take to get all of the things that they want to implement completed. So I guess those are the bulk of my comments, at least at this point.
Thank you. And were there any problems, errors, or issues that jumped out at you? Any weaknesses or gaps or omissions?
You know, I didn't really notice anything that was a glaring omission. I think not being as familiar with the individual processes or the general orders that I am, I feel at a loss to really compliment or comment on some of the specifics. But from what I saw, it was generally complete.
Thank you very much. And as I continue to work down the list, apologies in advance for any informality. Some of you are logged on just as a single name, so no offense intended to anybody. Next, Ana Sanchez, the floor is yours.
I like the report, how it basically had examples. It's well explained, so I didn't have to do besides like research and separate. And I really like how sometimes they had like the links where I can find information and go deeper on that subject specifically. The report is well written and well explained.
Thank you. And Anna, is there anything in particular, any recommendation here in particular that jumped out as you something that's especially important that you would like to see the Sheriff's Office work on?
So far, no.
Any glaring omissions, anything that where you thought, wow, how come they didn't talk about that? That's really missing here.
I say basically how they, like, I did not know that. So basically when they're like about to use force, they have a whole list like foot pursuit, exaggerating violence, etc., controlling handcuffs, and all of that. So basically police take actions based on what's happening, and I did not know that there's like a whole list for it explaining.
Thank you. And any other thoughts or comments for the moment?
No.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Bob, floor is yours.
First of all, again, thank you. Thank you to the sheriff, as well as thank you for your company for doing the work. A couple of issues. A lot of my background is in training. I was at the FBI Academy for a number of years and taught at the Leadership Development Institute there. So I'll focus a lot of my comments on the training aspect. Number one, first of all, I thought that the report, generally speaking, was really good. Really appreciated it. Appreciated the work that was done. So I understand what you had to do, and I understand the success that you had, I think, anyway. So a couple of issues. One of the things you talked about, you recommended hiring. In your some of your training programs, that rather than using officers, use contractors or civilians and so others. And of course, other departments do that. Fairfax County Police uses former police officers, civilians, and so on in their training programs. That's one thing. Another thing, because of the personality, and this is a generalization, but because of the personality types of law enforcement, and I know if we talked about Myers-Briggs typology, we'd find that they fall into a particular kind of under an umbrella. I think one suggestion is to build some of these attributes that you're looking for in your officers into your hiring matrix. What are some of the personality attributes of people some of the things that you're expecting your officers to behave that are kind of innate in their personalities, and so kind of figure that into the hiring matrix if you could. And I think another great idea was to integrate community members and community leaders into some of your programs. I know that I think you have like a community leadership program or something. I know the Bureau has those in their various field offices. And so bringing together members of businesses and so on, as well as different agencies and different minority groups and ethnic groups into collaborative, not only meetings, but into some of the training programs would be helpful also, I think. I think what else did I write down? I think those are the kind of the things that I would, suggestions. As far as critique, I don't have anything that's major, really. I appreciate the work that was done.
Thanks, sir. Very kind. There's a little bit of feedback coming from other. So we'll come back after we go around the table, but I do want to address some of your helpful comments about training and involving civilians. Thank you again. Brian, go ahead, sir.
Jonathan, this is Pat Garrett. Brian is part of our technical support. So,
understood. Okay.
We gave him that few seconds to give us a shout out if he felt so inclined, but I think he's just working the technical side. So thanks, Brian.
Oh, thank you. Okay, and sorry for the glitch. I can't discern on here who's within which group. Thank you. Then we'll move to Emily Windsor Fox, please. Emily.
Hi. Yeah, I really liked this report, and I think that you definitely provided actionable items that are concrete and can be implemented. I liked a lot of them. I appreciated providing officers with specific alternative options, giving, very specific ideas of this is how you can handle it rather than, what not to do. I do want to highlight number 50, which effectively says that there is not much of a comprehensive policy on dealing with persons with mental illness. I think fleshing that out is important to us at DRO with the Mental Health Rights Project. And, I think that the things you've identified within that are the highlights of what needs to be included. yeah, I mean, I think those were really my primary things, but I think overall it's really great, and yeah.
Thank you. And any concerns, anything that any glaring omissions or problems?
Not immediately.
Excellent. Thank you. Grace Sanchez, the floor is yours, please.
Okay. I have to say that I am agreeing with a lot of what Bob was saying in regards to the hiring matrix and so forth, having been a recruiter, a corporate recruiter, and then a corporate training and development manager. So some things did stand out. I believe you had said something. Backing it up. I did not see anything about, correct me if I'm wrong, conflict resolution training. I circled, I have a lot of notes. I circled a few things: conflict resolution training, building a way to build self-esteem among deputies, among police officers, pulling in training technologies that are used by other corporations or organizations other than the military. And I'm a war veteran, by the way, so I have a deep knowledge of what it is to be in war and in a place of trying to organize chaos. Finding ways to incorporate mentor, master, or mentee apprentice. And one thing that you said about the Marine Corps Doctrine on Learning, the one thing that I took away was that the best learning was the one that was experiential and embodied. And the other thing that I took away from that is when I was on the rifle range, the people that were training us were trainers. They weren't temporarily on the job. And you need to leverage and have a sort of a deep knowledge of training and training technology in order to pass that information on. Those are kind of the highlights. One thing that I have a note on, and I've only lived with this information for about a week, and it's a lot, and I feel like I do have a lot to give to it, and I may just email it to you, Jonathan. One thing that I pulled up was it said that while nearly all police community interactions end peacefully, I do have some notes about language and use of language. I believe that we should change peacefully with trust intact. That something ended with trust intact. That once you change the language to develop, trust, find ways to develop trust. And a lot of times that takes an understanding of vulnerability. And speaking of vulnerability, I think that there also needs to be added into this is the care of the department, the deputies themselves, finding a way in which, or a program in which someone can say that they need to step away, maybe a language, they need to step away for whatever reason, and destigmatize mental health among the department. That's kind of the top line of what I found in the report, which is wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your generous and thoughtful feedback. You said a lot that resonates with me, and I'm sure Denise is laughing. I'm resisting my natural tendency to blurt things out, engage everybody in conversation because we keep moving around the table. But thank you again. I look forward to talking more about some of your comments. Jessica Miyake, we'll yield to you, please.
Thank you. So I enjoyed reading the report. I thought it was extremely thorough. I did like that it pointed out areas that the office is doing well in and areas that need some improvement. I really thought that point 31, placing the community at the top of the agency's organizational chart, sounds like very valid, but my concern would be that this is not just some honorific position, that this is actually something that's recognized. And I'm curious how this will be implemented, if there's more of an opportunity for community feedback. And I also thought that point 29, the Professional Standards Unit and Survival Skill Council body-worn camera program should be integrated to ensure greater efficiency, documentation, tracking, and overall accountability. I found it interesting that that this unit is currently run by 2 sergeants under the command of a lieutenant. These are things that I was unaware of. And I do hope that the sheriff's office takes these under consideration. We have another round that we can go around in, right? Okay. I did have a question, but I'm going to hold that for my second opportunity to speak. And I'm hoping to hear a little bit more about the selection process. I saw that Polis could not reach out to a certain number of interviewees, and I'm curious if the 11 community members you felt was enough for a good amount of survey respondents.
Excellent. And one quick point of clarification, again, we'll come back to this in closer detail. Those were actually, those were full-on interviews, not just surveys. Those were lengthy conversations, but we'll definitely come back to that. Any other further comments for the moment?
I have a lot of highlighted sections. I probably should have put Post-its on here. I did have a little bit of questions on the clarity. I do see a lot of sections where the policy makes reference to subjective versus objective use of force, proportionality. To me, proportionality of use of force sounds very subjective, where it seems like you want to go more in the direction of objective use of force. And I would like a little bit more clarity on that too.
Definitely. And that's, and a quick point of order as we go around. I think what, when we're done with everybody, Denise and I will try to pull together some of what's been said so far, but I don't want to lose any of the questions. So as we go back through our second round, I want to be sure that if we've forgotten any questions, that you feel free to speak up and make sure that we don't leave this evening with any of your major concerns unanswered. Jessica, anything else for the moment?
I'll hold my other questions for later.
All right, excellent. Justin Lockie, the floor is yours.
Team, thank you. I'm going to break my own personal rule, which is typically I don't caveat feedback, but I want to honor the diversity of this great group, which is my caveat is, I come from a family where English was not the native language spoken. I'm in fact the second member of my family ever to go to high school, let alone go on to that. And in my role as chair of the County Civil Service Commission, where I audit the sheriff's office, there probably would be on paper the biggest reason for me and the sheriff's office not to get along. And so when I make these comments, all these caveats are to show that I come from a place of different perspectives as much as I can in my role. But number one, I've just been thoroughly impressed by the openness and the self-reflection of the sheriff's office, not only in my 7 terms as chair, but in my service since 2009 on the Civil Service Commission. The sheriff's office has always been authentically open for not only peer review, but to listen, not just wait to talk, which is very rare in any walk of life. So I want to say that. The other thing, Jonathan, and this is probably more for rhetorical and reflection, but I do think it's very important, which is in the last 2 years, I've spoken to more than 100 municipal police officers, sheriff's deputies, military veterans, and those in the intelligence community. And I see 2 common threads that I still think are very germane for our sheriff's office, which number one is training. I think in a safe space, well over 70% of folks have told me that in their walks of life, they feel that their training has been sacrificed because they've been neurologically wired to train themselves. So they've had to yield that funding. I want to make sure that we as a community do a better job for our sheriff's office in that space. I think everybody wins. And the second is, I would just say that anecdotally, and this is where first responders, and I consider any sheriff or police officer or veteran first responder, has said it in different ways, but I've decoded the same way, which is there is a general feeling that the culture in the last 3 years has changed with the relationship between first responders in the protective space, like our sheriff's office, and the community. And there is a quiet concern sometimes when our first responders have to make tough calls that the government does not have their back. And while that does not necessarily influence the immediate decision, it's understandable that that could put our sheriff's office in a very stressful situation. I felt that the report that you did covered that, but I think that keeping it real, as my 21-year-old daughter would say, I think that there are further honest discussions we need to have to ensure that our sheriff's office feels that the community has their back and the community feels that they can, in a safe space, challenge decisions. But overall, I felt that the research was very thoughtful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Lots of important points to which I hope to return. Casey Lewis, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Starting off with sort of the nice things that I have to say, both about the report, but also I just want to say Washington County Sheriff's Office has really been, I think, as far as law enforcement, just goes above and beyond to be partners with us, to have open communication with us. And we have really appreciated that a lot, building that relationship. And I think it shows a level of caring on their part that, like you say, is more than you see everywhere. It's not to be taken for granted, I think. I also was very impressed with sort of the direction that the report is going in, with the comprehensiveness of the recommendations. As far as things in the report to focus on, I would really say, as much as everything is important, keeping an eye on sort of those initial contacts and keeping things sort of de-escalated, and building the skills to be able to do that, I think just has such an impact, not just on the contact itself, but creates benefits upstream of the person not having to be arrested, not having to be put in jail, that then not creating more opportunities for there to be potential uses of force, and also not creating more sort of setbacks for their ability to reintegrate into the community, and making it less likely that you'll see them again. And I know that I'm kind of reiterating and reinforcing what Emily said with the focus on mental health. And that is in part because of what our role is as the Mental Health Rights Project. But I do think that one of the big challenges in law enforcement right now, at least from what I have been hearing from people who work in law enforcement, is that working with people with mental illness used to be a relatively small portion of sort of what law enforcement was. And it's becoming a growing part of that. Our law enforcement are unfortunately being sort of forced to shoulder the burden of our failures of other parts of our system to provide the support that people need to be able to not be experiencing mental health crisis out in the community. And so I understand why there's sort of the recommendation around looking at these policies more. You could have written a 70-page report just on law enforcement interactions with people with mental illness. But I definitely encourage follow-up on that particular item. And our team and anybody with lived experience that you want us to go out and find and bring in, we stand ready to be a part of that effort.
Thank you very much. Great comments. Luis Hernandez.
Yeah, so thank you again for bringing us together. I really like the diverse group that you have here, and really enjoying listening to everybody's thoughts on this. Overall, when I was reading the report, what stood out to me was a very comprehensive look at policies, at our procedures, and I think really embedding the principles and the ideas that the sheriff, kind of started off our meeting here with, and some other language things like it was kind of. It wasn't a big surprise because I know how it happens, but referring to threats versus threatening people. And I think those things kind of reflect, across the system, there's probably language issues, kind of spread throughout. And so I think really looking at, kind of the principled leadership that we have now and ensuring that it's reflected in our policies and procedures. I think that's going to be, I think it's very practical to do. I think it's very feasible to do. And I think it could really move the needle forward. So I think that's really great that you guys really looked in depth at all those policies and procedures. I think there's also, kind of in that realm, even just as we have evolved, as departments have evolved, ensuring continuity between the different groups. You can fall into disrepair, just by not having good quality control on your policies and procedures. And so by doing that, I think you can, make sure that we keep things, going in the right direction. There was can't recall which item it was, but one thing that I appreciated was I think there was a call out for, I think there was an acronym called FATO. I think I may have it here, but let me try to find it.
Well, you're thinking of FATO. That's from the NYPD.
Yes, correct.
Force, abuse of authority, disrespect, and offensive language.
Correct. And I thought that's a good call out, because I think that if you can look at those types of red flags, if you will, those types of indicators, behavioral indicators ahead of time, you can prevent things from, getting to a bad situation. So I think, because when you think about, I think the biggest challenge is, obviously going to be on the cultural side and, making that transformation happen. But I think tools and methods like that, where can you kind of put indicators out there to, identify those trends or identify folks that maybe might be going down a path that could, lead them to react a certain way. So I think it's really smart to have those types of tools out there. Another piece that I thought was really good was the idea of education, adding education, training and education director. I think that, when you look at training, it can be very, very finite, very to the point, but I think education really expands your thinking to learning, to continuous improvement, to, really creating a good culture. So I think the education aspect is a very good component. So, but yeah, those are just my comments for now.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Maria Caballero.
Maria, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. I appreciate your comments at the beginning where you talk about policing, having to work with ambiguity and in times of crisis, and that kind of set the tone for my thinking in terms of the report. I appreciate the thoroughness of the use of force information and all of the technical information. I happen to sit on the sheriff's office as a civilian looking, as a community member, reviewing use of force reports, and I see how internally the staff struggles to make sure that that they're interpreting everything right and that they're listening to those of us on the committee that are community members, and our feedback through the lens of community and making recommendations. This is how it looks to community. This is, when you use that word, this is what comes to up for us. So I appreciated that, and a lot of the information that is in this report was right in line with that. I appreciate the information about the use of body-worn cameras and extending that to a full range of operations and not just on patrol, for example, but looking forward to when it's fully implemented organization-wide. I also appreciated that the recommendation that police should be lifelong learners, and you don't stop when you graduate from the police academy or the training academy here locally. That sense of a learning organization, and always keeping in mind that you have to be in touch with the community, because you've got to continue learning from the community and adjusting what you do from that. So I really appreciated that. And then also lastly, I did appreciate the recommendation that community be placed at the top, even above the sheriff, because police are public servants. That was very important for me. The thing that was missing for me was the recommendation for an intentional hiring process that with the goal of reflecting the community that the sheriff serves, because that is non-existent, and it's non-existent in the ranks all the way up. And so I think that that's a major place where we need to spend a lot of time with the way we recruit and hire and train and retain, and the background check process. All of that we have to make some changes there. And just what was being said earlier, I think it was Justin, about the community and police not feeling that community has their back. I think that the community is at that place at the same time. So if you can imagine what a volatile situation we're in, where, we need to trust the police, they need to trust us, but we're just not there. And I think that community is really waiting for something that the system will do to begin to build that trust, or to show you can trust us. Can we trust you? So anyway, I appreciated the report, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for the detail and candor, and I especially appreciate your pointing out that we could have said more around the hiring process. There are a few things in there about that, but I think we could have spelled out some of that in closer detail. So I appreciate the feedback. Melissa Laird, we yield to you.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much. So there were 4 areas that really stood out for me in this report. And the first one was just how amazingly tough the job is for the sheriffs, for the officers. They have to learn, best practices for this huge breadth of technical and performance skills, including adaptive decision-making, social interaction, trust building, controlled defense tactics, de-escalation tactics, decisions on the fly. So it's just, through the whole thing, it went like, wow, this is a really, really tough job. More than I realized, more than I think a lot of people realize how hard the job really is. So your recommendation of developing and implementing the positively oriented outcomes-based training program is very good. And I really liked a lot of the thoughts inside of that. And in the back of my head on that one was, how can we educate community members, like we're talking about, getting places where the community can trust the law enforcement can trust the community. How can we, educate them on the breadth and depth of the training required for this job, and understand how much each officer is contributing to time and effort, and lifelong learner to do this job really well, because it's really, really hard. Part and parcel of that is just the Public Safety Training Center. I agree with you. I think it's an awesome center. It's just amazing. And the idea of challenging the Sheriff's Office to make this a regional center for criminal justice excellence, I think is perfect and right on. And that may be one of the areas where we can keep the community more informed, invite them to open houses, show the kind of training that they're doing, and everything that the Sheriff's Office is doing to help make the community safe. And that is just a great facility to do that. The third thing I had was I really like the idea of creating the professional standards division and integrating the professional standard units, the survival skills, and the body-worn cameras into one organization, and raise it up to the highest levels of accountability within the organization. So that's good. I really like the idea that that it incorporates the a review of exemplary conduct as well as misconduct and reviews and training. So it diffuses this idea that the PSU, or the more internal affairs part of the organization, is just a punishing body, but it's really showcasing not only the great things that the officers do, as well as those that maybe need to get better. And finally, the body-worn camera program. I'm really glad that you called that out. It was a lot of hard work for the Sheriff's Office to get that program in place, keep it going, keep it funded throughout the years, and a number of town halls on that one. So I think it's great to see the vision of where the police, where we are today with the body worn camera is at a perfect place for it to take to the next major leap, to be a critical factor for the accountability and training for the use of force and where we're going with the sheriff's office. And I think this is another good area where we can continue to keep the community involved, to show them, that this body worn camera program, which had some concerns, is really key and fundamental to accountability and training, making sure that the use of force policies are the best that they can be, and that's just another place I think there's a great opportunity for community interaction to show the value of that program. So those were my 4 major areas. It's a great report. I loved it. It was actually a joy to read.
Thank you very much. Thank
so
you for that. That's a lot of great feedback. Thank you very much. Olga Acuna, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Jonathan. I also was very impressed with the report, with the study. What resonated with me was that it was really aligned to best practice. The recommendations that were made to look at the different policies and merge the policies to build a more explicit language around the work that the sheriff's office does was very intentional. I really liked the way that was done. That the policies be updated, merged, some of them to be merged, reviewed, all of that was well done. That was really, it resonated with me. It was very comprehensive. The entire report was comprehensive, and I really enjoyed reading it. What you did well, I believe, is it looks like you went through the entire review of everything that has to do with the use of force, from policies, training, even how personnel are positioned in different roles, the language that was highlighted throughout the report. So that's what made it comprehensive for me. What I think was missed, there were a couple of things. One was the way that the community, citizens were involved in the process. I know that some stakeholders were interviewed. There was an online survey, but that was an internal where line deputies were interviewed and officers, but the community, did not have a lot of enough engagement, and so that was the piece that I thought was missing from the report. So the diverse voice, there was not a diverse voice representation. The 5 community emails that were received also, it was not a diverse voice representation. The other piece that I thought was missing, and Maria mentioned it had to do with the hiring practices. That piece was not there. And then the recommendations generally were great. I was very impressed with those. One recommendation that I thought could have been made, and I think it was made, but not explicitly, that the sheriff's office involve citizens or community in an ongoing kind of a basis. I'm thinking quarterly listening sessions where they listen to community comments and receive feedback. That was referenced on pages 14 and 26, just not in an explicit manner. That's all I have for right now.
Thank you again. I especially appreciate your feedback on the fact that we could have said more about hiring. And Denise and I will also come back here in a few moments because you're the second person to raise the concern that we reached out to a number of community folks from whom we didn't hear, and that you're wondering aloud, and we want to answer it. What else might have been done or could be done going forward to engage the community. in a wider fashion. So thank you again for that. Rob Drake, go ahead.
Thank you. I've served the city of Cornelius for 10 years. And when I came to this city to say our police department was in disastrous shape is an understatement. We discovered many issues with the department. Some were not resolvable. And so the council made a decision following our recommendation that we disband the department. I've personally worked with and known the sheriff for 2, maybe even 3 decades in my career here in Washington County, and have had a high level of trust with the sheriff and the department. I would describe it as not as a bias, but in terms of seeing the good things done. And we interviewed, and the sheriff was interested. The council made a decision to disband the police department, and 8 years ago, we made a decision to go forward with the sheriff. It's one of my major decisions over my career. It wasn't my decision, it was a recommendation that I feel really comfortable about. And for this community that had been fearful of the police department and there was little, if any, relationship, it's changed considerably. I will say that I think the evaluation was honest. I think Polis was, when I say tough on the sheriff's office, it's simply you gave a strong look at what existed. And I would argue, or the way the process had been dealt with over the years, because it was done in phases and chips, it's organized natural chaos. That said, the recognition is there, and I think there's an opportunity to do the consolidating that needs to be done, bringing the right divisions together, giving it the appropriate management level and oversight. But overall, I think that evaluation, the comments that have been made today were both really excellent. Moving forward, I would stress and suggest an existing committee of lay people, and not the usual suspects, but folks who might be that second tier leadership in the community along with regular leaders, so that there's an ongoing opinion. And I feel comfortable in sharing this, and I agree with it. Maria Rubio had suggested focus groups for our process of renewing our contract with the sheriff's office. I like that idea, and I think it would be helpful as we go forward and piece together this document, we as a community, that some additional focus groups be pulled together to get a little more detail about what people thought. And it may help make up some of that ground of not being able to hear from more people embedded in the community. But overall, I think the report was really well done. Lastly, I might hire a third party. I don't know who he or she would be, but to work with the command staff of the sheriff's office and be an objective third party to throw ideas back and forth as you implement and pull things together. Someone who's not on the sheriff's payroll, but can be there as an interested, caring third party that will represent all interests in the community. And I don't know who that might be, a retired college professor, maybe a person in the industry who is innovative and knowledgeable, but I think we move into a new phase now. And I have faith that the sheriff is going to give it the vetting and the integrity and interest that needs to be done. And I look forward to the next phase, because I think it'll make the sheriff's office, if not the best department, one of the best departments in the country. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Russ Sheldon, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I also believe this to be a very comprehensive report and review that it isn't always easy to order, because unless you want to hear about criticism, unless you want to fix things, you usually don't even want to hear about it. So, that in itself speaks volumes. And really, for me, it's a lot about the keywords in the report. There isn't a single recommendation that I can't support or wouldn't support. And I think a lot of those make sense. And certainly that's not something that can all be accomplished in very short order. So that's entirely up to the sheriff and the team to tackle these items, find out where the resources are going to come from, and move in some sort of a fashion to put this plan, implement it, and get it going. Because I think there's a great deal of very useful information. I think about the words I wrote down. I'm just going to go through them real quick. Consistency, clarity, direction, update, implement, communication, guidance, responsibility, network, and education. And those are the key components of any good organization. If they're paying attention and if they're really interested in how they're doing, it's that key performance indicator is, in fact, the final product is, okay, what's it going to take to put some polish on this? And I think in regards to the professional standards unit, I certainly think, along with the accreditation that the department undertakes, which is separate from this Polis look and purview, is that essentially it helps drive not so much the regulation, but that this is and should be adopted and should be a tracker of that. So as far as specifics, I think I wrote down 331, which was, yes, I believe the sheriff's office should basically hold the community at the top. They are a public service organization. I think about police as peace officers. We lose that word a lot. And sometimes maybe that confuses folks in our community. But 43 was something that I think also comes out to me as we should recognize those who have the behaviors that we're interested in emulating in all of our people, because other people will aspire to do those things. And to me, that's important. So really the only other thing that I had, and I could go on, was 53, and that's about the whole outcomes-based training. And I think the only real missed spot for me would be on the hiring side. And it really has a lot to do with the behavior, the mentality, the people we attract. If we're going to have de-escalators, we can't hire escalators. We can't do it. It isn't going to work. It's just not a good formula, not in my opinion. So that's pretty much where I'm at with it. And I'd certainly like to see feedback if it's continued through even another group, but certainly see where we go with it, kind of get a report card, so to speak.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments. Seth White, I yield to you.
Hey, so starting out, I'll just remind everybody that I work at the public defender's office. So, that's kind of like my slant, right? But I'm pretty analytical, and I didn't read this report, and I read every word of it over the last couple of days. I didn't read it as incredibly critical. The way I read this report was, the Washington County Sheriff's Office has taken a very good step over the years to put in place policies that they believe are accurate and consistent with what they should be doing, and trainings that should be consistent with what they should be doing, and really a best effort. I don't read it as anything other than that. What I read it as is kind of as I think Rob said, the next phase. you're working in an organization and you don't have time at any level, any position to really take a really high level view and then dig into the details of what should we change? What can we do consistently across the organization to change? And that's where you guys came in. And I found the probably other people would acknowledge it, the policy piece, which was a large part of it, to be really a dredge for me to get through. But I understood, because it's just policy, right? It's just words in a manual. But I found it to be important because it really described and changed kind of the narrative of what we're telling our officers when they dig into the manual of what's important, right? With the overall principle being trust, and a focus on an organization that looks at what should we be, here's the things that have gone well, and we should emulate those and not a focus on the negatives. So that's kind of how I viewed the report. I thought it was very well written. I thought it was very good. I echo, I think it was either Rob or Russ and everybody else, frankly, that, everything in here I would implement. I don't know what the financial resources it requires. It doesn't seem to be a large undertaking, more than a restructuring, and a refocus of current resources, but I may be wrong on that. So I took this as affirming that the Washington County Sheriff's Office has taken a really good attempt, and it took somebody else to come along and say, how do we round out the edges? Some of the pieces that for me resonated were the training piece. And again, as I said before, the focus on when things are done right, when things are done exceptionally, this is what we want to emulate, as opposed to looking back and looking at somebody on their worst day and saying, let's focus on this one particular situation and this one particular person, and let's not emulate what this person did. And so I think that is a good transition to how to view the training exercises. I felt like the references, I don't have a military background, my family does. And I thought that, the references to some of the military's training was not something I'm intimately familiar with, but it talks about repetition. And I found that the trainings that, if they were more focused on repetition as opposed to what I'm kind of hearing as in, here's how we're going to go through all these things, here's what it's going to be, and then we don't have much time to actually do the training scenario or solution or whatever, that the repetition is better, right? Because repetition makes things more natural. And then I really liked the idea of having individuals that are conducting the trainings, whether it be weapons trainings or close quarter combat, whatever the trainings may be, or de-escalation, that they're people that they're not starting their sessions at the same time, that they're rotating, and that they're longer sessions, as well as people that in some way are identified as doing an exceptional job with the training and retaining them, because I think they bring more value. They may be a great officer in the field, but they probably have more value sharing their experiences and their thoughts and their philosophies to create more people that are like them than it is to just put them in the field. I thought that seemed to me to be one of the most important pieces, because really what this comes down to is training. And I don't know how I didn't see a lot on hiring. That didn't strike me in this, but it didn't strike me in this because I don't know what the hiring criteria is, but I know that training can help people look at things differently. And that comes to the one piece that I kind of, being in the public defense side of things, didn't see a lot of, and there might be a reason, but I would like to have it considered, which is really interactions with people, and especially people with mental health issues. And I think kind of part of that is, when we identify the negative things that the officer's doing, and we're getting away from identifying, this is your worst day, this is what you did wrong, God forbid you lose your job, God forbid you take a life, God forbid you hurt somebody, but they're dealing with people that in large part are having one of their worst days, right? And so they don't want to be identified and singled out for their worst day, yet they're looking at all these people that are having their worst days and humanizing those people more. humanizing the mental illness and maybe the subtleties of mental illness, because they're not always the schizophrenic that's walking around talking about word salad. It might be somebody that maybe they're having a mental health crisis, but the officer believes that they're having a substance abuse issue with methamphetamine, which raises their alert level, which increases their readiness to use force because of the dynamics that come along with with methamphetamine use or other stimulant use. And so having people through the training process that's not just tactics, but also humanizing individuals that they're interacting with and understanding more of the nuances of mental health so that they can further humanize those people. And I say all that without losing, the understanding that the officers are dealing with at times their own life and death situations and the decisions that they make and how they interact with these people. And if they choose to try and de-escalate a situation instead of using force, it can put their lives at risk. And that's a really difficult dynamic. But I think learning to humanize people and the people they're working with on a daily basis, which is the vast majority of the interactions, I think would be something that should be incorporated in the trainings. And I think those are things that, I noted that, I don't want to leave people off here. Bob talked about that. I think Melissa may have said something about that. Luis talked about this a lot. I think Jessica may have as well, and I'm probably missing people. But to me, those were the big points. The other thing was I didn't really see much about talking about the culture, and kind of, I'm going to say this, and I don't mean it to be in a derogatory way, but kind of we hear that thin blue line as people that are not in law enforcement. And I know the policies are set up to kind of change that culture, and the trainings are set up to kind of change the culture of like protection. But it wasn't really talked about. And I think that's kind of like an elephant in the room, because when you're in an organization and you're doing these things, you want to protect not only yourself, but other people, because there's that fear of how things and bad days will affect you. And I didn't really see that talked about. And it just kind of makes me wonder, where does that fit in? So sorry, I talked for a long time, but those are my thoughts.
No, excellent. Thank you for the detailed feedback. Before Denise and I start to pull some threads together here, is there anyone whom I missed? Will you raise your hand virtually or speak up if I missed anybody? I think I got to everybody. I apologize if I didn't. Okay. Well, thank you all for the candid feedback. And I just have to say that this conversation has really been a microcosm of this entire process, where people are thoughtful and respectful and candid and honest. And I just want to say this out loud on the record: Washington County Sheriff's Office, Washington County, make hay while the sun shines. You've got a great relationship internally in the Sheriff's Office, between the community and the Sheriff's Office, and really capitalize on that. Denise, I want to yield to you to offer some of your thoughts and responses to some of the collective themes that are emerging in this conversation so far.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I took a lot of notes. So all of this was really great feedback. I certainly appreciate it, and I'm sure the sheriff does as well. There are a couple of pieces that, some underlying themes around the level of community engagement, and I'll defer to Jonathan to answer that. But there were also a couple of points that I think would be helpful to bring up in the interest of just thinking about how the sheriff and the agency itself can think about what are the next steps. So there were some interest in, well, what's next? How does the sheriff continue to compile input? And then how do they share some of that information going forward? I appreciate the response and the feedback related to the policies. I think, a saying that I know Jonathan is familiar with is culture will eat policy for breakfast. And so policy is oftentimes kind of the underlying issue, and also the way for agencies and their leaders to hold folks accountable. So if your policy is not good, you're not going to be able to hold your officers accountable. So when you read our report, that's where we start, from the very foundation of what it is to hold folks accountable as policy. And then you move into training and actually implementing some of those changes. There were a couple of comments around training and some of the specifics, and I will defer to Jonathan to hit on some of those issues as well. Jonathan, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Sure. So I'm just going to offer a few global comments that I hope will integrate some of what's been said so far. And then Sheriff, Undersheriff, I'm going to yield back to you to offer any response to the first go around. And then I want to draw out from the from the participants any further thoughts they have. So to begin with some thoughts around a very important point. I apologize. I can't read through all my notes, but the point was brought up that there is a lot of language in the report about objective versus subjective standards of use of force. One of the things I want to highlight, this is both from our own research and wider research in the field, the use of force and how officers make decisions around the use of force, and I'm talking here nationally, is actually much more objective than what the folklore of policing and common knowledge would often make it out to be. The point I want to make is this: while policies, procedures, and so on vary among departments, if we give a Washington County deputy, an officer in Vermont, Hawaii, California, pick whatever state you want, if we give a common scenario to a group of expert officers or deputies, the expert officers and deputies will significantly converge, number one, on what's going on, and number two, on what should be done to address that situation. Similarly, in medical situations, right? So if some of you will be familiar with the concept of a tumor board in cancer treatment. We can bring a number of experts together who will agree on the underlying diagnosis. This person has this type of cancer, it's spread to these parts of the body. And then the different folks at the table will offer up potential therapeutic interventions. The point I want to make, and I want to say this loud and clear, use of force decision-making can be and should be taught and analyzed as a data-driven process. We know that experts significantly agree on what's happening and what should be done. So that brings me to some of the comments about training and education, and I really appreciate that so many of you picked up on that thread. A number of years ago, I was after Ferguson, I made a comment at a large Chiefs conference, which I don't think endeared me to everybody in the audience, but I'll repeat it here. I said to a large group of sheriffs and chiefs from around the country, folks, do we train so that we can accomplish our mission in a safe, lawful, and ethical manner? Or do we train so you can survive the next deposition or press conference? And Washington County is one of the rare exceptions to the deeply, deeply troubling trend in law enforcement where too much training is a theatrical, post-facto, knee-jerk response to crisis. Sadly, most of what passes for training and policing is a threadbare, fleeting effort to address the last crisis. Washington County has the luxury of an amazing training center, some very, very talented trainers who are motivated and passionate about what they do. You've got a strong community, and so many of you have spoken up tonight. And I've been saying to myself, "Oh, that person should be teaching at the academy. That person should be involved in the learning process at Washington County." You've got a critical mass of talent in and around Washington County that I think can further amplify the strength of the training and education already going on at the sheriff's office. There are a number I know of military folks on this call. The military has the luxury of deployed units and home station units. So you've got folks who can be in classrooms and training environments for weeks and months at a time. In policing, the sheriff has about 600 and some deputies deployed across the jail and patrol. And the only way to train those folks is to pull them off the road or out of the jail, to bring them on a days off, or to pay them overtime. So there are logistical, operational, and financial bottlenecks to doing more training. So one of the things that we continue to challenge the sheriff's office to do is find sustainable ways to train and educate deputies on a continuous basis to make them lifelong learners. Because when training is only a theatrical knee-jerk response, it doesn't get us where we need to be. And I think Washington County is far and away one of the best positioned agencies I've seen in a long time to leverage what we're talking about here, to think about an outcomes-based paradigm. I want to say one more thing, and then I want to yield to the sheriff and undersheriff. One of the things that Polis pushes hard is not just looking at where failures have occurred, but even more important, looking at what has gone right. To go back to some of the statistics with which we open the report, the sheriff's office responds to close to 200,000 calls for service a year, and uses force about once out of every 250, 260 contacts. Most of those uses of force occur predictably in responses to crimes of violence in some of the busier districts in the sheriff's office, and happen at night. So the patterns of use of force we see in the sheriff's office are consistent with what we would expect anywhere in the country, although the use of force occurs at a much lower rate. I want to know why, systematically, the sheriff's office uses force so infrequently, and why, when it does use force, whether in the jail or on the street, that force is within law and policy. And so we want to identify systematically and replicate systematically and fold into everything beginning with a hiring process, those patterns of success. So in addition to looking for outliers and holding people accountable and looking for what's wrong in the organization and individuals who need to be held accountable, I want to know why the sheriff's office gets things right most of the time. And this, again, is like medicine or aviation. If you look at commercial aviation today compared to where it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, flying has never been safer. Why is that? In medicine, surgical success rates, recoveries from traumatic injury are much higher than they used to be. So we encourage the sheriff's office to leverage data from body-worn cameras, from other sources, to systematically identify those sources of success and ground those across the entire life course of every deputy, from selection to hiring all the way through retirement. Police hiring right now is a seller's market. Finding smart, talented, idealistic people who want to be cops is very, very tough. And I think the sheriff's office is better positioned than a lot of agencies to attract the talent, but the struggle for good talent right now in policing is really, really hard. And sheriff, undersheriff, I know you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to ramble on any further and take up any of the valuable time, but sheriff, undersheriff, I want to yield back to you for a few moments to give some of your responses. Then I want to be sure we go back to the group.
Thank you, Jonathan. I will be brief, because I just can't tell you how impressed I am about, again, the wisdom in this room, the conversation, the recommendations, and the thoughts that are being shared. Hugely helpful to us. I'm going to answer a few questions. What are my priorities? What are my initial impressions with this report? I'm just going to give you two examples of where I think Polis really nailed it for us. And this has been raised. The policy recommendations address about 20 of the individual recommendations to kind of collapse our multiple, rather minimalistic policies into one or fewer, more rich, more thorough policies in order to strengthen the culture of necessity when it comes to using force, sanctity of human life, align the standards for enforcement in jail into one policy, eliminate duplication, and fill in the gaps. I talked with Jonathan about this during the project, and he directed me to one example, the Las Vegas Metro's policy. And I read that policy, and oh my gosh, it explains things in a way that makes absolute sense, in a very thorough way, but also a way that's very understandable to any reading level. Leads with why it's intuitive, it's educational, has a wonderful one-page model for use of force that brings all the elements together. It has multiple parts, and it fits well together. There are other examples out there. That I'm really excited about how we can take a policy that, one great way to describe policy, it's what right looks like. We got a lot of smart people here. It's our responsibility to spell out in very clear terms what what at the end of the day is right when it comes to doing their work. And this is a great example. The second one I love is putting community atop the organization chart, right? So it's not a direct line. It's not authority, but it is a incredibly important value statement that without the community, we're not successful, right? So that community, some of you had called that out. My thank you to ensuring that we know how important that is to you. That's important to us if it's important to you. 2 recommendations I think are off base, the discipline matrix. So Polis just didn't know. The Oregon legislature tasked the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission to come up with a discipline matrix for some of the most significant misconduct. That's ongoing now. So that's going to be a reality for public safety and law enforcement agencies across the state in the coming year, 18 months. And then recommendation 48, I love it. I wish we had patrol lieutenants, jail lieutenants working 24/7. The fact is we don't have enough of them. We would need to talk the county into some more. And maybe that's a realistic goal. But right now, that's just not realistic for us. Timeline. We are going to identify what goals are we can implement and prioritize those goals in year 1. I told the commissioners in the first 6 months, we would provide them an update about where we're at. I love the suggestion that's been made here tonight about perhaps taking some of this group and reconvening, right, and helping us as we move along and implement these recommendations. Finally, I want to address the question about culture. It was a beautiful question, maybe perhaps not addressed in the recommendations. What my experience has been is, yes, culture eats policy for breakfast, but where you have organizational buy-in, which we do for being explicit about force being a necessity rather than it being permissible. It's largely implicit, but we need to make it more explicit. Policy drives training and standards and leadership development. And I think that's really where we need to focus going forward. John?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Jonathan, Denise, and their team for really challenging us on this. We're taking these recommendations very seriously. I also want to thank all of our community partners that have provided feedback to us to help us improve. We are taking all of these recommendations and have a plan for implementation. And so I love the idea of us sharing back that progress with the community. And I think there's some meaningful ways that we can do that. And we look forward to continuing to move this forward.
Thanks, Sheriff and Sheriff. I wanted to offer just a couple of quick remarks. I promised I would come back to the issue of community input to this report and the fact that we didn't hear back from as many folks as we would have liked. So I said at the outset, any deficiencies or limitations with the report are my fault alone. And one of the difficult choices I had to make early in the process of this project was figuring out how many folks we could reach out to in the community, given limited time and resources, trying to reach out to as many folks as we could, especially in marginalized communities, communities of color, communities that have sadly well-grounded reasons not to always trust or like law enforcement. Unfortunately, we heard back from less than half the folks to whom we reached out. Some of the folks from to whom we reached out were recommended by the sheriff's office. Others we reached out to based on our own research. There's a lot of convergence between the two. I do think that the limitations of the folks with whom we spoke notwithstanding, let's say about a third of the people to whom we reached out, while we would like to have talked to more people, the themes of feedback we heard were consistent. And I certainly think there are future opportunities here for the sheriff's office to do more work around community engagement. But I am confident that we heard a number of voices, shared concerns that have come up in this conversation today. But we're never going to hear everything. As for the community survey, I know we work with the sheriff's office to do a press release early in the project. We set up an email account, and unfortunately, we only heard from a handful of folks. In retrospect, I think there are some things that I could have done better to get a larger response. With that said, I think we've come away with a lot for the sheriff's office and community to wrap your heads and hearts around and really move forward. we've got only about 15 minutes left, and I really want to yield the floor back to all of you. If you'd be kind enough to just speak up or raise your hand, and let's be sure we hear any final remarks and action items going forward.
Say something.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I just wanted to really appreciate what Seth said and highlighted. Kind of the elephant in the room when we're talking about culture. That was one thing I had made a note of, kind of answering what do I think was missing a little bit, and I think it's really kind of addressing that piece. And I know that we can pivot into a whole conversation, probably a whole study on just that. But I think that when we're talking about community trust, I think there's something to unpack around that, the culture that has kind of grown around the thin blue line and other kinds of trends that we're seeing. It's hard to build trust if we don't, if we ignore some of those concerns. So maybe that's for a future date, but I just wanted to share that.
No, I appreciate the feedback, and speaking as both a retired cop and an academic who studies policing, I have a lot of friends in the police world who think the police can do no wrong, and I have a lot of friends in the activist community who think the police can do no right. And as in most things in life, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And I think based on what we've seen at the sheriff's office and what we're hearing from folks like all of you, I think you're well positioned to work through those challenges. There are many folks in communities who sadly have good reasons to have concerns about the police. Reciprocally, cops are having a really, really tough time. And to channel the police side of things, I am heartbroken, and I choose the word carefully. I'm heartbroken by the number of idealistic, smart, highly professional officers all around the country who are being driven from the profession because they feel vilified for doing what they do. And I think there's a difference between focusing on a few bad actors and society's vilifying the profession. And this is something I used to say to my university classes: until your moms and dads want you to be a cop as much as they want you to be a doctor or a lawyer, we're not going to get where we need to go. We need to hold police accountable, but really recognize and respect the amazing responsibility that the police have and the intractable difficulty, and attract to the profession the kinds of people who can accomplish the sorts of things that all of you are rightly pointing out. Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to try and put my hand down if I can. So I guess what I would say is, again, I'll preface this, I have worked in Washington County for almost 15 years doing criminal defense, and I handle the really high level cases now, but I've handled them all the way up. And I know through jail interactions, all the deputies and a lot of the, patrol officers I've interacted with over time. So I have a healthy respect for them. I guess what I'll say is to one of the sheriff's comments about the lieutenants on the night shift. And I guess what I would say is, I know that there's unions and that makes things difficult to change things, but I would challenge the sheriff to kind of maybe think outside of the box on, on specifically the lieutenant on the night shift issue. And I'm not trying to nitpick, but if the deputies on the night shift are calling for it, if the sergeants on the night shift are calling for it, if I know from my experience that that's where, a large number of my cases are coming from, doesn't that make sense? And it may not sound great. There may be union issues related to shifts and all those things, but it may be worth thinking outside the box. And that's not meant to be a criticism, but it more of a willingness to at least question what is the norm. And I use the thin, and I'll say I use the thin blue line comment only because I don't know how a better way to say it. I fully believe that the vast majority of officers that are out there that I interact with are really in the job for the right reason and trying to do their best. And that doesn't mean that they can't do better or training, but we all have bad days. And unfortunately with law enforcement right now, that's what gets highlighted. And that makes it really tough. And I understand that.
Well, thank you for that, Seth. And just a very quick response, and then I'm going to yield to Olga, then Jessica, then Bob. Just 30 seconds on our motivation behind the lieutenant on the night shift recommendation. We recognize that sergeants are burdened with an enormous amount of paperwork, administrative tasks, and we think the sheriff's office needs to do what's possible, given limited resources, to have the sergeants out in the field responding to calls with their deputies. And having a lieutenant who can integrate across multiple sergeants, make sure commander's intent is being executed, we think there's some wisdom in that. Anyway, I don't want to go further into the weeds. Olga, we'll go to you, then Jessica, then Bob. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm thinking that, thank you, Pat, for prioritizing the community and putting the community at the center of the work. I think that along those lines, it's important that we continue to find ways to engage community at the county level. With Washington County being as diverse as it is, I also would challenge your office to look at now that you'll be looking at a new strategic plan, right? Because it's you have a plan that's dated 2020, 2022, perhaps. Defining what the hiring practices are going to look like so that they are more reflective or somewhat reflective of the community that you serve, given the diversity of the community. So I would challenge you to consider that. And also the education, the training and the education, I would highly encourage you to also incorporate an equity lens, looking at equity, diversity, and inclusion, access all around. What does that look like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like in everything that every officer does in Washington County?
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Luis had mentioned earlier this evening. He was talking about how he appreciated the language of the policy being more humanized. And I think that's really crucial, especially when you're talking about recognizing the sanctity of human life. I also think that the point 22 about implementing a community transparency policy, I think that's really crucial, especially since you opened up this report with trust is safety, safety is trust. I think that's a really important part of developing that trust. But it's also really important to get the right part of community, the part that's having a trust issue involved in this. And I had a question about, I guess I've seen a couple of references to this throughout the entire report, but the reference to Graham versus Connor, I believe it's point 9, and utilizing the Graham plus standard. I wasn't familiar with Graham versus Connor, and I'm sure Seth probably is in his line of business, but when I read up on that case and that ruling, I was a little perplexed as to why this is being implemented at all in the policy. It sounded outdated. It also didn't seem like something that we should be implementing at all in the sheriff's office. To me, it sounds like a way to hold on to a legal loophole. And it made me uncomfortable to see that is being implemented.
So very quick answer, and I work, this is about a 90-second lesson on Fourth Amendment law. To be perfectly clear, the sheriff's office has no choice but to abide by Graham v. Connor. So Graham is the minimum standard set by the U.S. Supreme Court for evaluating the constitutionality of the police use of force. You are absolutely correct that Graham over time has come to be less of a standard than what I think and the public thinks. I think a lot of police leaders think the standard should be. We cited in the report the work of one of our colleagues, Seth Stoughton, who's one of the leading constitutional scholars on the Fourth Amendment and police use of force. But we, for the reasons you say, Jessica, this is why we recommend what we call a Graham plus standard, meaning Graham is the floor, right? You have to abide by Graham because that's the standard set by the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's what every law enforcement agency in the United States has to follow. We're saying you have to go above and beyond that. Graham plus means not just that my actions during the use of force were reasonable and necessary, but that my words and actions prior to the use of force were reasonable, necessary, and respectful of human life and dignity. And so we think that Washington County is already probably a step beyond Graham, but we think formalizing that Graham plus standard is something we'd like to see nationwide. It's something we push hard, not just in Washington County, but with all the agencies with whom we work.
Well, along the same lines of that, this this citation on here, number 9, finding 9. I do feel that if there is a reference to Graham Plus, I would love to have something to include implicit bias, because I feel like that's a really important part of that case that was not brought up back in the 80s.
Good point. And I know I recognize we're coming up on the top of the hour. Bob, you had your hand up, and I wish we could go on.
That's right. I'll just real quickly. I can put everything in writing, but just one comment you made earlier about the disillusioned, idealistic officers who are leaving. Here's a nice place to send them. Here's a place that's open to idealistic officers who are looking to do the right thing. So in your travels and in your interactions with those officers who have lost their their zeal, Washington County Sheriff's Office would love to hire them. I'll just leave it at that. I suspect they would.
Yeah, I remember, in fact, one of the meetings, Sheriff, with the command staff, I know somebody actually put in your recruiting link in one of our chats because this topic came up. Sheriff, I want to defer back to you and the undersheriff for any closing remarks and thoughts. I wish we could go all night. And Sheriff, if I'd also just ask you, please, to let the community members know what conduit you would like for them to relay further feedback to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. And thank you. My thanks to everyone in this room for investing in our future here at the Sheriff's Office and for our partnership in community. It's hugely meaningful to all of us. And I can't overstate my gratitude and thanks to you. I also want to call out, this may have been on the remarks I just saw. So, we're a bunch of adults here, to include Anna Sanchez. Look, Anna Sanchez, you're our youth ambassador tonight. I tip my hat to you for being here. You just by having your presence here really made tonight special for us. So thank you for being here as our youth ambassador. We're going to email this entire group about our next steps, and I'm enthusiastic about having at least some of this group who are interested to work with us going forward. I promised our Board of Commissioners an update. It's the 6-month mark. That's about November. And we're going to do that with this group as well. But I'd say the next week or two, once we can kind of process tonight's great feedback that we got from you, we're going to reach out by email and about our next steps. Our updates are going to definitely be on our accountability webpage on our website. That's first and foremost where you're going to find the updates. But you've invested in us. We're going to continue this relationship with you to include how we're going to move forward in our updates and how we can use your ongoing collective wisdom to help us in that process. So thank you very much.
Nothing else.
Okay, Jonathan, any last words from you?
Denise, anything? Any parting remarks?
Nothing else from me. Thank you.
Well, community members, Sheriff, Undersheriff, thank you for giving us the opportunity to wrap up this project on a high note. I really say this, and I know I'm channeling our entire team. I have the highest confidence in your collective capacity to find common ground on these very, very difficult matters and put Washington County in the vanguard of progressive, accountable law enforcement agencies. And we look forward to hearing more success stories coming out of the sheriff's office. And we know all of you will be decisive in making that happen. So thank you for taking time out of your evenings, and feel free to reach out to us and as well. But thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Good evening. Thanks.
Take care.